Welcome, everyone. My name is Nate, high school football coach in Illinois, and we have a great day ahead of us and an hour to talk power today with Coach Ryan Burgess out of New Jersey, CSCS certified, Long Branch High School, and Coach Burgess has such an interesting story. Coach, this has been my adventure. I believe this is week 10 of I'm a 20-year football coach who's been honestly running the strength program at every school I've been at, and took 0 minutes to talk to somebody who was strength certified. And I finally said, that seems silly. And I started this trek to find certified guys to pick their brain. And you
Awesome.
are our next guy who we want to pick your brain. Coach, give us the 30-second intro of yourself.
30 seconds, man. Like you said, my name is Ryan Burgess. I am a coach in New Jersey. Currently, I'm coaching the defensive line at Long Branch High School. Prior to that, for the previous 3 years, I was the strength and conditioning coach and offensive line coach at Keensburg High School. Prior to that, I've been in the strength and conditioning game, I guess you could say, in every facet you could imagine. I worked at a private facility by the name of Fitness Quest 10 in San Diego for almost 8 years. And then I made a valiant effort in opening my own place in Loveland, Colorado, crashed and burned and learned a lot in that process. When I was trying to kind of come back from that, I was even coaching, helping out coaching with a Special Olympics powerlifting team in Northern Colorado. So, you know, I've seen quite a bit. This is, I think, if I count college, this is right around 15, 20 years that I've been heavily pursuing strength and conditioning. I was a non-scholarship football player at Colorado State University. So my experience there is what really kind of, got me on the path, so to speak.
Man, such a cool story, honestly. And now you've been coast to coast, man. San
Yes.
Diego,
Yep.
lived in the mountains, and now on the East Coast in Jersey. And now Jersey's where you grew up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yep.
good to be back for you in Jersey and coaching high school ball.
Yes.
Do you? And now this is a little bit of a generic question, but you can only ask so many questions. I can only ask so many questions before I really let you speak. Do you find, and I don't need the big answer, just like short version answer, do you within your school train athletes differently per sport?
I'll speak on what I did at Keensburg, because that again was where I was most recently doing the strength and conditioning. I'd say yes, but slightly. So if I was to give you the short answer, it would be yes, but minimal differences.
Okay. And how much do any quick tips for a strength and conditioning coach before I really turn it over to you to speak on what you're going to speak on? I'm really excited about your topic today. Any quick tips for a strength and conditioning coach that maybe he's new at a school and he's dealing with a whole bunch of new coaches? It's a lot of new people you got to work well with all these people have different opinions.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I would say it is a relationships business, both with our athletes and then, the coaches of the teams that we're servicing, and then on top of that, you've got administrators, and them are familiar with anything that strength and conditioning is about. So instead of trying to sell strength and conditioning, sell service, explain that you are there for them, that you are there to, hopefully make their job easier. Your function is to send them healthier and, potentially, better performing athletes, and let them know that, help those kids perfect their athletic skill. But I think it'd be very, I feel like as long as you're showing your willingness to serve, it'd be very hard for other people to combat that.
I really like that, Coach. I wrote that down. I think that's huge. You're right, Sell. Service. And I love that word, and very powerful. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, Coach Burgess will be presenting, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say. And I'm excited for you guys to see this.
And when we make our counts, that's where everything starts with our triple options. So our progression when we come to the line of scrimmage is the center is going to make his call, the two guards will make their calls, the two tackles will make their calls, and then our tight ends, if they're in there, are going to make their calls. And that right there helps our slots and our quarterbacks identify who number 1 and number 2 are, which I'm going to show you here in just a second. So our A-frame dimensions, as you can see here on the screen, each line is 5 feet apart. So we'll paint our lines 30 total feet or 10 yards, and every 5 feet we'll paint a line. And then our fullback's heels are 5 yards from the tip of the football. So as you can see on the screen right here, the tip of the football would be right here, and then the fullback's heels are going to be right at that 5-yard mark right there. We also draw a line in our A-frame to indicate where the defensive lineman's hand should be. And we do that because a lot of times when you have scout players, they don't always line up as detailed as you'd like. And so we try to put everything out there for them so there's very little room for error. And so we put that line down, and it's very easy for us to say, line up behind this line, and that's where you go. Because what happens a lot of times in our A-frame is the reads who are supposed to line up behind that line, they might start to creep up a little bit. And if that's the case, it throws off our mesh with our quarterback and our fullback. So we paint a line for the guys to line up behind. And then finally, we also paint a circle to represent the outside heel of the tackle and the tight end. And we do that so our slots are able to line up off of those guys right there. So when we have those circles there, it really allows our slots to have continuity with where they're going to line up each play. And that's how we paint our A-frames. Some of the constants that we have in inside view is
All right, we are back, and time for Coach Burgess to take it over. Coach, we're talking about the minds today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, I can't wait to hear what you got to say. And again, I had somebody, what was it, a week ago, Cody Hughes, maybe 2 weeks ago. We were actually, it wasn't on the Power Hour. We had a strength conditioning night here on our YouTube channel. And he had a powerful word. And he said, I just try to remember, I try to remind people how powerful psychology could be, and how many times psychology can be more powerful than physiology. I think that was the line. And I loved that line. So here we go. Talking more about the mind, and turn it over to an expert. Coach Burgess, take it away.
All right. So once again, I just wanted to say thanks to Coach Nate for having me on. Hang on, wrong button. Present, not share. There we go. All right. So like Coach said, I'm going to be diving into today the relationship between sports psychology and strength and conditioning. So I cobbled together my slideshow last night after we got back from a rain-soaked football game. So I had to throw some pictures up there real quick on a little bit more about me. Like Coach said, I've been coaching for a very long time. I wouldn't be the man that I am without my family. And then finally, in addition to playing football in college, I went through a fun little adventure in competing in powerlifting and strongman. So I will be the first to admit that I wasn't very good at it. Had a lot of fun. So, one other tip that I give to some of the younger strength and conditioning coaches, Get under the bar. Give yourself a chance to train and compete on your own, and I think that's going to help you a lot in becoming a better coach. Now, I developed this interest in sports psychology as a strength and conditioning coach. I'd say by about year 6 or 7 in the trenches, and by that I mean, my 6th or 7th year working as a strength and conditioning coach, which if you add to that all my years of being an athlete who cared about his strength and conditioning, that was probably around the 11th or 12th year that I'd been exploring these things. I was getting really burned out on the constant arguments over squat depth and the efficacy of conditioning, like, should football players run gassers and whether or not football players should Olympic lift. I felt like a lot of these conversations, especially as trends started to swing certain ways, it became very egocentric in that, we'd get with a group of coaches, we'd all talk about this stuff, we'd all kind of agree on what we should be doing versus what is happening, but nothing was changing. And that really, started to kind of eat at me because, I can only coach my athletes the way I can coach my athletes, but why are we continuing to have these conversations? So that kind of drove me into looking into, the psychology of behavior, because at the end of the day, when you're talking about being a strength and conditioning coach, or an athlete, but especially as a strength or an athletic coach, but especially a strength and conditioning coach, you are trying to convince people to do something that most of them probably don't want to do to get to the place that they actually want to be. And what that is, that's behavior change psychology. That's how do I convince this person to change their behavior to serve their best interests. So, the interest was piqued. I started reading about the topic and exploring it on my own. And then, as I kind of alluded to before, when I moved from San Diego to California, opened my gym, lost my gym, and then went through some other things, going through those challenging situations reinforced my fascination with behavior even more. And specifically, like the question I show right there, why people take the actions they do, versus what they say they want and what they actually do. And I put myself right in this category. I feel like this is a very human thing. And the way that I always explain this, to my athletes when I introduce it to them is, if you walked down the street, say I live here in New Jersey, say we went to a pre-pandemic Manhattan where there are literally thousands of people on the sidewalk. If you walked up to every single one of those people and asked them, do you want to be successful? Do you want to have more money in the bank account? Do you want to have satisfaction in your job? Do you want to have happy relationships? Every single one of those people, I would bet money, would say yes, they want to be successful. But then when you look at a lot of data that shows collectively how people feel about themselves, success is a rare thing. So if we have all of these people that say they want something, but very few people are actually attaining it, where's the disconnect? And you can see that a lot in athletics too. If you talk to any coach, I'm sure they want to put a winning product on the field. If you talk to most players who sign up for a sport, I think they want to be successful and want to win. But obviously not everybody gets to do that. So, in my experience, I feel like the key to unlock that was behavior. And then finally, it's just been reinforced even more over the last 4 years when I came home to New Jersey, because I've specifically found myself working in what would be considered low socioeconomic school districts. and that's just driven it even further, because I feel like giving kids who grow up in those environments the potential mental tools they have to not only find success on the athletic field, but to, you know, continue to carry them through the inevitable challenges they face in life. You know, to me, that's why I do this. I want to win games and help people get stronger and faster just as much as the next guy. But, you know, that's why I do this. And just two little anecdotes kind of really solidify like how this came together. I did a presentation for the NHSSCA last spring titled "How to Eat Steak" in, you know, optimizing youth athletic development. And the idea behind that was, you know, I spent a few minutes going over the different ways you could eat a steak, you know, doing it the proper way, doing it the Coach Burgess way, where I never put my fork and my knife down for whatever reason, or doing it the caveman way, where you just grab the steak and eat it. And then the conclusion of it was, it doesn't matter how I teach you to eat a steak if you're so poor you can't afford to buy one. And, you know, I'm constantly giving examples of some of these challenges that our kids go through in these environments. Like just recently we had a very, you know, foul weather football game, and I was helping, you know, my kids get their minds right for that. And one of them responded to me, said, you know, "I'm good, coach. I grew up using the stove as the heater." Like, you know, so working with kids who grow up in these environments has just fueled my interest in, you know, behavior psychology, so to speak, even more. Now getting to, you know, what that research has brought me. So my personal education, because like I said, this was an area of interest of mine far before I started to formalize it. It started with a dive into philosophy. I'm not going to lie. It started when I read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl back when I was in my mid-20s. That kind of sparked a dive into Stoicism a little bit. You know, well before that philosophy had its resurgence in the last like 3 to 4 years. Then I honestly couldn't even tell you how. I ended up going into exploring something called self-determination theory. 2 books that, you know, in addition to actually exploring the theory itself by those authors, 2 books really kind of helped fuel my pursuit of this on a personal level. The book Drive by Daniel Pink, and then the book Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. I know that's all, you could never pronounce that name unless you'd seen it a lot. So as you're going to see on the next slide, self-determination theory kind of starts with experience. So as I explored that, that had me wondering, you know, what are we doing habitually? So 2 books that really helped me there were first The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and then Atomic Habits by James Clear. So, Mikey, come here. Here's the iPad. I was charging it for you. Sorry about that, Coach. But yeah, Atomic Habits is a little bit more recent, and that he even referenced The Power of Habit in his book. But you know, again, habitual behavior, as I started exploring this, is what really leads to long-term change. Now, what self-determination theory actually amounts to, and this is something that I think strength and conditioning coaches and athletic coaches can benefit from. When you get your athletes to experience these 3 things: autonomy, competence, and relatedness to the goal, that's going to help create motivation, engagement, volition, and that ultimately results in improved performance. I think, again, as sporting coaches, we can all, like that result. Persistence. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about like grit and toughness. But this is a theory that is shown if you do these things, you can actually improve people's ability to persist at a task. And then creativity, which, I think sometimes we get a little boxed in as strength and conditioning professionals. So giving our kids, our athletes, the ability to develop some creativity when it comes to their strength and conditioning practices and even their athletic practices. I think that's a good thing. One of the most electric NFL players over the most recent years has been Patrick Mahomes, and I think most people would agree part of the reason he's so fun to watch is he's creative on the football field. Now, transitioning into my more my more formal education, which is more recent. I am set to graduate with my master's in sports psychology from California University, Pennsylvania this December. This in and of its own self has been a really cool experience because getting this degree and going through their program has been a goal of mine for probably about 10 years. From when I first started exploring this concept on my own, I had colleagues who'd gone through their program. So it's been really cool how, life kind of came full circle for me in a way where I've been able to pursue this program. I'd be the first to admit, hopefully like most people who practice in any field of science, I'd be hard pressed to consider myself an expert. It's just something that I'm really curious about and I'm constantly exploring. So, there are things that I'm probably even saying in this, presentation that can be refuted or changed or challenged down the road. And that's one of the, to me, one of the intriguing things about science. My biggest area of research over the last 2 years of this program has been grit and athletic performance, because I feel like grit became a big buzzword over the last few years. And being a person who's been heavily involved specifically in football, you're always hearing about toughness and things like that. So I've tried to use this opportunity to see what the actual science has to say. The text on this might be a little small, but this was what I did for my research on this topic is I did a literature review where basically I looked through a ton of the peer review data, tried to look for more, through more specific references. And the reason for this, and getting back into like rationales and why this stuff mattered to me, yes, sports psychology is cool from a performance standpoint, right? Like, we want to get our kids, performing better. But one of the biggest reasons was, the dropout rate in youth sports. So, like, if you look right over here in this slide, every year about a third of kids who participate in youth sports drop out. And by their 13th birthday, half of them will quit. And that bothers me because I believe so wholeheartedly in the value and the importance of youth athletics, like through high school, and I'm not talking about sending kids to be college athletes or one-day professional athletes. Just there's so much value in participating in sports that if a lot of these kids are quitting before they even get to high school, why is that happening? Because as I explored this, grit or persistence could be considered a solution to that problem, if we could get kids to develop more grit or develop more persistence, then maybe the dropout rates wouldn't be as extreme. And the research proved what you would expect, that higher measures of grit do have a positive correlation with the probability of sticking around with the sport and actually being successful at that sport. As far as techniques to improve grit, though, honestly, this is an area where more research is needed. The thing that looked to be most effective was something called functional imagery training, which is something that I'd encourage you to explore a little bit on your own. And getting back to self-determination theory, this is where a lot of my research led me back to. And I'll actually go back to that slide real quick. So these three things, because I feel like these three things, strength and conditioning coaches and sporting coaches can, develop in their program. Autonomy. So autonomy is basically giving a person a feeling or a sense of control, that they have voice and they have choice, to make it really simple. And I feel that there are ways where you can integrate this into your program without, losing your overall program control. I've seen, and I apologize because I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I've seen a strength and conditioning coach where he'll throw like some choice activities out there for kids, where okay, we have, of these three things, pick one of them, and this is what you're going to do. Where you've created the framework where you have belief in all three of those things being valid choices, but then now they're getting that sense, that feeling of autonomy, because they're picking, they're choosing. Competence. So we think that kids need to be constantly challenged and pushed, and they do. Don't get me wrong. But the more a person can experience success at doing something, then the more that's going to lead into these other factors here that we talked about. So motivation and engagement and volition. Now, this is where the research on self-determination theory, and then also grit can be really synthesized, because with grit, with trying to develop quote unquote toughness, people need to be put in challenging situations, and ideally you can find a way to put them in challenging situations that are going to be related to the challenging situation that they're going to face in their sport. This is why I'm personally not a big fan of the militaristic boot camp style team bonding exercises that you see prevalent throughout I feel like you see it a lot in the high school football community, because it's hard. It might develop a little cohesion, but it has nothing related to the eventual task at hand. And this is where, again, it's kind of on the coaches to come up with their creative ways that they can relate, that challenging task to the end goal. But if you can put them in those challenging situations in a practice type setting, and then have them be successful in it, that's having them develop competence. So then from there, you've checked all three of those boxes, and that leads down the road to things that I think we could all agree that we would want in our athletes. So, improved performance, persistence, which again, there's that word, persistence and grit, and then creativity. activity. So that is, I think, the end of my slides. Hang on one moment here. Here's my drawing. I know I wanted to make sure, because I know the way these topics can be a little heady at times, to give you my contact info, because obviously, or I hope obviously, you guys could hear how how much this whole concept means to me. So if you're ever curious about it or want to just talk shop or whatever, my schedule's kind of nutty, but I'd be happy to speak to anybody and everybody. So definitely, I welcome all of you to send me emails if you ever want to. Twitter and Instagram. Twitter, I'm definitely, I'd say a little bit more focused on my coaching pursuits. Instagram, I've really kind of pulled back a lot on all social media over the last year or so. So most of the Instagram pictures now are my son, but nonetheless, wanted to throw it out there for any of you guys who want to connect, in our modern virtual world. So with that, Coach Ed, I guess I'm going to stop my share and turn it back over to you.
Coach Burgess, we appreciate that, and I've got a handful of questions written down. Excited to talk about that. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, a little Q&A with Coach Burgess.
Here we are at clinic.chiefpigskin.com. Excited to share with you our schedule real quick. When you log in, it brings you to your dashboard, and you just want to come up here to the site and click Visit Site. I know that's a little odd, but that's the way the system works. Go to videos, and you will see the now, we're so close to 200 videos. Here, these are presentations from high school and Division III college football coaches, even one or two, actually three to be exact, Division I college football coaches, and we just keep adding. Look at all these presentations that are there for you. I could go on and on. But if you go here to the schedule here coming in 2021, we're already off to a great start, and I've even booked one with Robbie Howard out of Beardstown, Illinois, who's got a program there that's really on the rise. And I haven't even added that one here, but we've got Watkins coming to our office from Chicago, Concordia University, Chicago. We're heading to New Mexico to visit two high schools, La Cueva and Cleveland, in early November, Chatham Glenwood in January, and Owatonna out of Minnesota. You look at these little red notes here, you see how good these teams have been. State champs, 29-6 over the last 3 seasons. We're just super proud of what we're putting together. We hope you'll check us out at clinic.chiefpigskin.com.
Welcome back. This is the Power Hour. You just heard from Coach Burgess on some sports psychology. And Coach, I felt like I couldn't help but feel like I gave you 20 minutes to present on a presentation that is more like 20 hours, right? Like, I feel like you really just got to touch the surface on so many things. It looks, and you've done so much research on this. If you kind of packaged what you talked about and told somebody, like the elevator conversation, what type of what would you say to somebody in an elevator you have that long to influence or to, let's say, a strength guy or a coach? What kind of influential elevator conversation would you bring it all back to, that all that you have been studying?
So the first thing with autonomy, and for a lot of us who grew up in let's face it, an age where being coached harder may have been the norm. Giving kids voice and choice in your program isn't soft, isn't less than. If anything, crafting a way where you can give them that sense of autonomy is actually going to lead to the results that you want to have happen. It just takes time. And then the second thing I would, if I had just a short moment to drill it down, would be relatedness to the task at hand. I think tying it back to, one of the things that is always discussed is, gassers in football. And, I think when you're looking at the specific athletic development of something, obviously you want to look at the demands of the sport. And, it's no different when you're talking about helping people, improve their overall engagement in an activity. Athletes, what drives them. I'm a big fan of Tim and Brian Kite. So for any of you guys who've ever seen, the R factor and, E plus R equals O, culture is the same conversation being had with kids over and over a long period of time. I think I kind of butchered the quote a little bit, but, getting to understand what drives your kids and relating the activities you have them do to their drives is another way you're going to really improve, the engagement. And when I keep saying this word engagement, it's that other buzzword we've heard a lot over the last few years of buy-in. So, anytime you're going to get more buy-in from your athletes, I think, that's going to be a good thing.
Coach, I really love that, man. You had talked about, and it's funny because I'm reading a book right now, and that book is called True Grit, right? So I'm reading the original novel by Clinton Portis and
Okay.
Not Clinton Portis, Portis anyway. Charles, maybe. So I'm reading that novel, and young lady is looking for a guy that has grit, right? She's big on it. And you use that word grit and you're studying it. And as I look at the same conversations that you're talking about, right? And you're saying voice and choice is not soft, and the conversation of gassers. And I look at that and I guess it's hard to ask this question, but as I'm trying to word it correctly, words like grit and toughness, although they are hard to define and quantify, I do still think they have meaning and relevance. So how do we walk that fine line of, okay, they do exist, they are relevant words, but they're hard to quantify. So I guess I don't want to write it off. I don't want to write that word off, but I also can't just say, I can't just keep trying to make you puke because I feel like it builds something that's hard to define or can't be quantified. What would be your reaction? I guess I maybe made more of a statement than I did a question, but that question has been on my mind a lot.
Well, first thing, you're not alone. In the research, the actual psychologists who are studying this, the research itself struggles with defining that term. So that will be something where, I'd encourage everybody who's interested in this, to be patient, because I feel like over the next 10 years, we're going to be exploring a lot more, or we're going to be learning a lot more about it. That should hopefully provide even more clarity. A lot of what I've referenced today are things that have only really been, unearthed, so to speak, or established over the last 15 to 20 years, which, in scientific terms is kind of a short time frame. So this whole concept is still relatively new. I will agree with, I think, kind of what you were saying there, though, is that I think we're very guilty sometimes in strength and conditioning, and coaching, and just like any other profession, where we swing the pendulum too far one way or the other. So for a long time, like grit and toughness started to become buzzwords. So we swung it so far where it was like all you could see. but then now there's that natural pullback happening. But we don't want to pull all the way back because, like you said, there's still value in those words, and there's still value in, you know, the development of those traits. I think the $1 million question is how, you know, how is that developed? But from what I've found, that the how boils down to a lot of what I said there is, you know, it's autonomy, it's relatedness, it's competency. And here's the brutal truth of it. It takes time. You know, it's not something where, okay, for football camp this year, we're going to run gassers after every practice because that's going to develop toughness. It's more so, you know, trying to craft an overall environment where you give your athletes these things that I've mentioned. And then over time, as they progress through your program, you know, from hopefully their freshman year through their sophomore year and beyond, by the time they're, you know, in most situations, contributing varsity athletes their junior and senior year, you're seeing them exercise a little bit of these character traits. But it's that, you know, slow cooker, not microwave approach, where we want to develop them over time. And it's not necessarily going to, you know, lead to success or change, like, you know, right away.
You know, the last thing, and I know you got to get going, you got another meeting coming up here shortly. So I guess, and when I look at it, you know, I noticed something over quarantine. So I'm a lifelong athlete. I wrestled in college for 4 years. I was trained in the old school way, you know, and especially wrestlers, you know, they're nuts. They take pride in the misery of it. You know, so I was trained like that my whole career, just in the toughness and misery and this, you know, they just kind of keep going. And so over quarantine, I got a son who's a junior in high school, and he's very, very capable kid. He lifts a lot of weight. He's tough. He's pretty tough minded. He's a wrestler too, but he has certainly been trained differently than I was, right? I don't coach him in every sport. And what I noticed over quarantine, as he and I are doing our workouts, we would do what was called, and this was something I was turned on to, I guess it's probably more in the CrossFit world, but a finisher. And it would be some sort of a superset, and there's a lot of fatigue involved in it, right? And so we would set up our supersets out here in our yard, and from pull-ups to maybe snatches to a sprint, just a down and back sprint, right? And we would do a 10 set of this. It was going to be tough, and I knew it. And I'd work out with him. I'm 42, and I don't work out much, right? So I know I'm out of shape. He's in shape. He's a stud. And we would do these finishers, and it was, I mean, just all I could do was notice he didn't even have a chance of keeping up with me. And I'm telling you, I'm out of shape. You know, it has had nothing to do with like pride on my part. I'm too bad of a dude. I mean, he's a way better dude than me. And when we would get to the finisher, he had no chance of keeping up. I would lap him. And I couldn't help but just look, you know, I tried so hard. I would get frustrated in my head. And I couldn't help but think, why is he so less tough? Right? That's what I'm thinking in my head. On the outside, I'm trying to say, it's all right, let's go, try to keep up. Am I seeing anything that's relevant to how the two of us have been trained, or is this a personal thing?
You know, it's tough to say. You know, it's a really, really interesting, you know, way to look at it. Part of it, you know, could be, you know, I don't know, maybe like my initial thought, like if you were to just give me my gut reaction is, you know, maybe his physical development at this point, his preparation has been a little bit more specific to the sports that he plays. So, you know, the fact that where you're at in your physical fitness, you're more of a generalist, like it's easier for you to adapt to, you know, a generalized activity than somebody who's a little bit more specified. So that would be my initial like just thought as to maybe why that happened. You know, I will say this, and again, this does go into what I just said before, like we don't want to swing the pendulum back, too far the other way. When I say putting these things in your program, it does like at no point did I say like, okay, you're making things easy now. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't say you don't do conditioning. I didn't say like, these things like it's just more finding a way to make it related. Like, speaking specifically from a football standpoint, if you look at a football play is basically a short sprint with some, resistance in front of you, depending on your position. But if you look at the average high school football game, you're looking at 100 to 120 snaps, sometimes even 140 snaps. So for football players who play both ways and, special teams like your studs, like, that's a lot of running in a game. So, you could do like high volume, short distance sprints with minimal recovery. You're working the actual energy systems you're seeing on the football field. It's going to be hard. And if you do something like that more towards the end of practice, are you working on your speed development at that point? No, because you're running on tired legs, but you are working the energy system to a little bit. And, you're giving your kids a related task, but it's also something that is hard. So when they develop competence in it, then that's going to lead to some of those other factors that we said. So, and again, that's why I always want to emphasize when I talk on these things, because I think some people hear this, especially the autonomy factor, they hear that piece of it and they think, oh, well, kids just want things easy. So that means we have to make things easy. And, giving them some choice doesn't necessarily have to mean making it easy. It's saying, okay, we're going to do these 3 hard things, but you pick the one that we're going to do. So, then at least they have a little bit more of a feeling like they're involved in the process.
I like it, Coach. I'm not gonna lie, but literally in the last 3 minutes of this conversation, I truly feel like I took a step forward in my understanding of this, because you're right. Like if I and you can't, I learned, what you learn on Twitter is you're not going to change someone's mind with 140 characters, right? Like you're not going to change someone's mind necessarily. You'll drive yourself nuts if you try, but you can influence somebody or get them to ask themselves a question. And there's so much that I can pull from this in my own coaching, even just voice and choice, right? I know I want to accomplish this, but if I know there's 2 ways to do it, I could allow those kids to choose between those 2 ways. And I'm so thankful that you said that, because I've been looking for ways, because I've continued to allow the kids a voice. And I keep going, how do I do that realistically? And you're giving me real ideas and all of this, right? That pendulum. I love it. I really do feel like I took a step forward in understanding.
Awesome.
I hope that we get a handful of others that have joined us on this. Hey, if you guys want to look up Coach Burgess, look him up at LB Ironworks on Twitter. And he really is a great guy and really into this. And as I can see, Coach, thanks so much for joining us on the Power Hour. Good luck at practice as you're getting ready to head over. Any closing thoughts for everyone?
Just dedicate yourself to learning. It's one of those things where I feel like a lot of issues over the time in the strength and conditioning field were just this issue with it was dogma. It was things happening because they've always happened that way. And I think the more collectively all of us as coaches can commit to being lifelong learners, then again, that's how you see paradigms shift over time.
Man, Coach, thanks so much for your time. I hope that you guys will take the time to look him up. Thanks for joining us on the Power Hour. If you could, leave us a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already. Of course, those things help. That's why every YouTuber says them. So if you do that for us, we'd really appreciate it. Guys, we'll hope to see you next Monday right here on the Power Hour.